It is Thursday, August 28th, 2014 at 1:06 p.m. We'll call the meeting of the Tennessee Advisory Council on Workers' Compensation to order. I'm Christy Allen, Assistant Treasurer. Treasurer Lillard apologizes. He is unable to be here. He had an unavoidable conflict, so he has asked me to serve as his designee. I've met with you all before, so it shouldn't be anything new. We have several members on the phone today. Before we get there, though, I'm going to ask Ms. Schroeder to call the roll.
Bye.
Did someone on the phone want to speak? Christy Allen.
Here.
Carrie Dove. Here. Jack Gatlin. Here. James Hale.
Here.
Bob Pitts. Here. Gary Selvey. Here. John Burleson.
Here.
Paula Claytor.
Here.
Sandy Fletchall. Bruce Fox.
Here.
Dr. Graves. Here. Troy Haley. Here. John Harris.
Here.
Lynn Lawyer.
Here.
Jerry Mayo. Dr. Merle. Greg Ramos. Here. Mike Shinnick. Here. We have 5 of 7 voting members present, another on the phone, so 6 total, and 15 of 17 total participating.
Thank you, Ms. Schroeder. So we have a physical quorum here, which means that we can allow the additional voting member to participate by phone. What that also means, though, is that each vote will have to be by roll call. So I'd say that for the record. With that, I believe Ms. Schroeder has some general announcements to make.
Just a few brief announcements. Mr. Gatlin, to my left, your right, is participating for the last time as a voting member on the council after decades of service. And we want to thank Jack for all of that service to the state and to this advisory council. And he has his soon-to-be successor, Paul Schaefer, in the audience. And he will be joining us next council meeting. We wish Jack well in all of his future endeavors. Sort of along that same vein, Bob Pitts has been reappointed by the governor to the council for another term. Abby Hudgens, who isn't with us here today, was recently elected as Vice President of the Southern Association of Workers' Compensation Administrators, and then will assume the role as President of that organization in 2015. And Abby has appointed Troy Haley, who's with us today, as her designee on this advisory council, so we welcome Troy today. He's the administrative attorney and legislative liaison for the Division of Work Comp, and has been with the division since 2007. Before that, he was staff counsel for a title insurance company and also was in private practice. John Burleson, who is on the phone with us today, welcome, John, has been appointed as the representative for local government on the council and will be with us today on the phone and in person at the October meeting where we can welcome him. John is an attorney and partner with the workers' compensation defense firm of Rainey, Kaiser, Revere, and Bell in Jackson, Tennessee, and has been since 1983. And one last note, not having to do with membership, but our voting member, Carrie Dove, was recently named as one of the nation's 50 most influential people in workers' compensation by Seek Incorporated. Thank you.
The next item, thank you, Ms. Schroeder. The next item on the agenda is approval of minutes from the February 27th meeting. And before we go further, I want to, just for our staff, please, if you speak, make sure you use your microphone so that she can pick up the audio and prepare the minutes. So with that, has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes from the February 27th, 2014 meeting? We have a motion from Mr. Pitts, a second from Mr. Dove, Mr. Selvey. Second. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, Ms. Schroeder, will you call the roll? I don't.
Carrie Dove. Jack Gatlin. James Hale.
Aye.
Bob Pitts. Gary Selvey. We have a unanimous.
Thank you, Ms. Schroeder. The minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda, we'll move to new business, and we'll have two presentations today. Our first presentation is by Mike Shinnick, designee of the Commissioner of Commerce and Insurance and Workers' Compensation Manager for the department. His report will be on the workers' compensation market conditions and environment. Mr. Shinnick, if you'd please come on up to the podium, make sure your microphone is on, and start whenever you're ready. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairperson Allen, and thank you, Advisory Council members, for being with us today. Good number here, and we present annually the overview of the Tennessee workers' compensation market conditions and environment, and we do this in preparation for your October the 14th meeting, whereby the actuaries come in, 3 sets of actuaries come in and present their findings on the loss cost filing that was just provided to you either Friday or Monday of this week, which indicates a need for a minus 9.6% adjustment overall for the loss costs here in Tennessee. So a very good number. It is the largest number that I've seen since I have been with the department, and I'm sure we'll have a lively meeting come October the 14th. So if you have any questions, just feel free to stop me during the presentation, and we will proceed here. The first thing we look at is the market segments. This is 2013 data. We don't have 14 data yet because we're in the middle of 14. So the latest period that we have to look at is 2013. So we've got this broken down into 4 segments. The voluntary simply refers to the coverage that is placed with private insurance providers in the state of Tennessee, not assigned risk. So it's everything but assigned risk. It does not include excess workers' compensation. And so you see that it went from $779 million in 2012 to $829 million in 2013, which represents a 6% increase. Self-insured's we handle self-insured's a little bit different because we don't really have premium to speak of in the self-insured, individual self-insured arena. But we do that on an equivalent premium basis. We basically currently we take the weighted average loss cost multiplier, the most recent multiplier for the period, and multiply that by the loss cost to get an equivalent premium. And the equivalent premium fell from $149 million to $138 million for a 7% decrease. Part of that is due to a change in the way that the equivalent premium is calculated. Originally, it was calculated on the basis of using the assigned risk loss cost multiplier, and now that changed a couple of years ago to using the weighted average loss cost multiplier for the market, and we will show you what that is in a few slides going forward. The self-insurance group fell by the most, 13%. That is an estimate. We got, I believe, 2 or 3 of the loss costs of the groups had actual numbers for us, and because we were so close to the audit period, we did not have actual numbers on a couple of the groups, but they were estimated, and so we saw a 13% drop there down to $20 million. The assigned risk plan, the TWCIP, stands for the Tennessee Workers' Compensation Insurance Plan, grew from 54 million to 64 million, an 18% increase from 2012. And that is a reflection of what's happening in the marketplace. You see, as the market starts to tighten up and to harden a little bit, you see more business going into the signed risk plan. So that's what's happening there. And we'll look at the data for 2014. We'll update that picture a little bit. It's not quite that large right now of an increase. Let's take a look at the national picture. And as I think about the national picture, I think about some NCCI charts that were provided to me by NCCI. And I wanted to make everybody aware of the State Advisory Forum. It's scheduled for September the 18th at the Sheraton Music City. And if you want to see a lot more information on both Countrywide and Tennessee data, then I would make your plans to attend that State Advisory Forum. It starts at 9 o'clock a.m. on, again, the 18th of September and goes to noon. This is a broad view of the property and casualty results from 2011 to 2013. 2013 are preliminary numbers provided to us by the NCCI and the ISO. If you will note that every one of these categories, the combined ratios have come down. Now, let me explain just a minute what a combined ratio is. And let me reiterate also that this is a calendar year number and not an accident year number. We'll look at accident year numbers in a few slides forward. The combined ratio takes a look at expenses and loss adjustment expense, adds those together for the total cost for workers' compensation, and you subtract that from 100 being break even. So if it comes in less than 100, let's say a 98, then you have a 2% underwriting profit. If in the case of commercial automobile that we see in the picture for 2013, it had a 105% combined ratio, which indicates a 5% loss. That is just on the underwriting side. It does not include the investment income picture, which we'll also take a look at. But a nice improvement in workers' comp. You can see from 115 in 11, 108 in 12, and 101 in 13 on a calendar year basis. And total property and casualty industry has a very good result in 2013 at 96%. Yes, Mr. Pitts.
I just wanted to observe to you that, we've been talking about this for a couple of years, and I'm delighted to see the industry is following your suggestion and writing to more actuarial soundness.
Yes, it's very good to see this. This is just part of the cycle. We're running into that part of the cycle that is profitable, and it's so good to see. I wish I could tell you 5 years from now it'd look the same, but I can't. And speaking of the cycle, that's pretty evident here. Comparing the property and casualty results with workers' comp. Workers' comp being the white or the gray line on top, and that's calendar year's workers' comp combined ratios, and the calendar year combined P&C ratio at the dotted line on the bottom. And I always like to remind everybody, and this hasn't really changed in 5 or 6 years, is that the results for workers' compensation are typically, on average, 6 points less favorable than the property and casualty coverage. So why is that? You know, whether we've got workers' compensation being a little bit of a loss leader, just more optimism than maybe there should be in the workers' compensation line. I don't know, but it's an interesting phenomenon.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course, Mr. Romas.
Mr. Shinnick, if you could, as you're going along, if maybe you tried to explain it with that last answer, but I want to make it real clear. We're looking at 2013 figures, not 2014.
That's correct.
And if you could, as we go along, if you could give what your feeling is, what it looks like a rosy picture so far, what you attribute that to, especially when we're looking at 2013 figures. That'll help clarify it in my mind and maybe solidify it in my mind a little bit better. Thanks.
I'll try to focus on
Thanks.
13. We're looking at an indemnity claims. Obviously, there are two parts of the equation. You've got the medical and you got the indemnity. This is indemnity, and we saw just a slight increase in indemnity claims from 2012 to 2013. If you look at the last 5 years, you can see some very good numbers as far as indemnity is concerned. Remember, these are not just Tennessee; these are nationwide numbers. We'll be looking at Tennessee here momentarily, but we over the last 5 years we've seen a very very strong indemnity result, and we're going to see that in Tennessee as well. So just kind of give you a little preview of that. Medical here is somewhat of a similar situation as far as the percentage increase. We saw last year in the Tennessee filing a significant drop in the medical losses, and there was a question of whether this was a trend, whether this represented a trend, and NCCI and the two other actuaries said, no, there's not enough here to represent a trend, so they went 0 on the trend line for medical. This is showing a trend. This is the national picture, of course, and if you look at the picture for the last 5 years, it's tracking pretty closely, and really 3 out of the 4 or 5 years were actually below medical CPI. Medical CPI is represented in the dotted light blue line, and change in medical severity is in the red line. So tracking very close to medical CPI. So that's a good result as well. So things are looking favorable from a nationwide standpoint. Let me back up because I wanted to point out something here. Back to 1995, the average price change or percentage change in medical severity was 6.7%, and you can see that it was approximately that in 2008, but after 9 through 13 preliminary, we have a much better results. Lost time frequency here. This picture that you see before you is pretty typical even before the 2000. We're only tracking this result from 2000, and I scratch my head on this thing every year and wonder what's going on with frequency, because frequency is declining. Typically, the frequency increases after a recession as the payrolls start come back up again. You bring in newer workers, less familiar with the workplace, and you typically have more accidents. And that's what happened in 2010. I think that what we're seeing here is we're seeing technology coming into play, greater technology and efficiency in the workplace, and as a result of that, we see the benefit being a more safe workplace. So I think that's probably what we can charge that to is the technology as well as the efficiency that technology brings along. Okay, here's the countrywide accident year combined ratio. And accident year numbers places all the accident results, the developed accident results in the accident year, not the calendar year. Calendar year basically takes all the losses for that year and then the reserve adjustments from prior years and puts that into play for the calendar year results. But this is, here again, an accident year result. And we're looking at 2013 preliminary being a 99. If you recall, the calendar year result was very close to that at a 101. The gray bars on the top are expense ratios, and that includes dividends. The blue bars on the bottom are loss and loss adjustment expense ratio. So you can see the very cyclical nature of workers' compensation underwriting in Countrywide at a height of 118 in 2010 to dropping down to 99, which the last time we were at a 99, we were in 2007. So clearly we're getting back into the profitable arena of the cycle. This is the operating gain, and the operating gain combines the combined ratio that we just looked at with the investment gain. And we had, if you remember, we had a 101 combined ratio for our underwriting result. We had a 15% operating ratio, operating gain. So from investment income, 15%, very, very good number, a surprisingly good number. And so those combined, 101 and a 15 yields a 14% operating gain, pre-tax operating gain. Now, I'm told that a good chunk of that is from the bond market. Companies are pretty heavily invested in bonds in the workers' compensation arena. It probably is the same case with P&C. But if those bonds were providing current yield bonds, that result right there would have probably been about 5 to 6 points less than what you're seeing on the graph, because an embedded number takes into consideration more mature bonds with the current bonds.
Mr. Pitts?
Is what you're really saying that these companies have a lot of old bonds that had high rates of return?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, this is the Goldman Sachs survey that we show every year, that provided to us by NCCI, and the numbers represent the I guess the cream color, the tan colored bars on the far right is January of 2014 when this survey was made. The light tan bar in the middle was from January 13, and the blue bar was from January of 12. So it kind of looks at what's happening in the first of the year in the various years and kind of see if there's a trend here, see what's happening. And if you take the result from 2013, January 2013, for those price segments that are increasing, that would be 1 to 10% and above 11%, or up above 11%. And you compare that with 2014, same period, you'll see that the increase, that 91% of the surveillance ended up with an increase, and compared to 2014, whereby the number was 79%. So we see prices beginning to moderate a little bit here. Same thing with the downturn, the decrease in prices from 1 to 10%. 2014 was about a 4.4% decrease, and 2013 was about a 1% decrease. So you see a little bit of moderation here, and maybe a little bit of softening up of the cycle. Okay, this is the renewal rates for the first quarter of 2013 compared to 2014. And the red bars represent 2014, or on your black and white handouts, it's the dark bar that is 2014. So you can see how workers' compensation price increases compared to the other lines of business. Workers' compensation having the second largest compared to D&O at 5.20, workers' comp at 4.1%. And you can see that's down significantly from 2013. So just another indication that prices are beginning to moderate a little bit. Okay, let's shift gears if there are no other...
1 second. Mr.
Okay.
Pitts, you're recognized.
We're still on nationwide, correct?
Yes, but the next slide is Tennessee.
Just an observation to see if you agree with it. While workers' comp is still second highest, when you get to like our state, recent and previous legislative actions have developed a downward trend also in costs. So if that had not occurred, that figure would probably be somewhat higher than it shows on this chart. You agree with that?
Well, I think, and we will see that because we have a slide for Tennessee as far as what the pricing is doing, and we will see that Tennessee is less than the countrywide change. I do have first quarter, but you will see that it's less. And as you say, we have the last three filings, I'm including this one, were significant decreases to the point of, combined with all three filings, were 21% down for the last three filings. So that works its way into the prices with the carriers, and so we couldn't help but have a significant net decrease. Okay, so here we're going to shift gears a little bit and look at Tennessee results. Here again, the cycle is pretty obvious here. We have been on an increase here since 2010 in premium. 2007, 8, and 9 were significantly impacted by the Great Recession, and now we're coming out of that. We're seeing, maybe I wouldn't call construction robust, because I'm sure Mr. Pitts would agree with me that it's not robust, but we're seeing an increase in construction, an increase in manufacturing, and so that is impacting the premium dollars as we look at the premiums historically. So we're about a 7% increase. This is assigned risk and voluntary combined are on these bars. So The Countrywide result was 7.8%, so we were right at the Countrywide result for premium growth in Tennessee. That represents a total combined for assigned risk and voluntary of $892 million. Now these next two slides came straight from the filing that you received earlier this week. Is the loss ratio picture for indemnity. This is the first slide. The next one is medical. But you can see the numbers have come down substantially, and we have in this filing a minus 3.5 trend factor. I believe the trend factor before was a minus 3, so I think they bumped it up a fraction. So we're down to a 30% loss ratio for the indemnity side. And what this does, it combines the indemnity losses, compares that with the premiums that are generated, the total premiums that are generated in the line of business. So it's only 30% in 2012. This is a policy year result. We don't have 13 in here because 13 we're still in the policy year. Business that had an inception date of, let's say, 12/1/2013 is still in force, and so we wouldn't include 13 data. Now here's the medical. The medical is perhaps with another year below 65%, we could call this a trend. It's pretty close to being called a trend, or at least from the appearance of our eyes concerned, it almost looks like a slight trend right now. But that may be a question you might want to ask to NCCI when they come in October. Okay, here's the long-awaited Tennessee result here for 2013 preliminary. 97.1, couple of points better than Countrywide, which is very favorable. If you look at the last 3 years, compared Countrywide and Tennessee data, the loss adjustment expense is 2 points more favorable. The expense ratios are 2 points more favorable in Tennessee than they are Countrywide. So we've had a pretty good run here in the last 3 years. So this is telling us that Tennessee made a 3% underwriting profit, or companies made a 3% underwriting profit in 2013. You combine that with the investment income that we looked at earlier, and a pretty favorable, really nice return for 2013.
Mr. Pitts.
Mike, I'm not sure where I should ask this question, and I'm not exactly on point, but I'm not sure it's coming up later. And I hadn't been able to get my arms around this in terms of thinking through it, but I got a chance to glance at the forthcoming filing. And what I have seen from your data is that indemnity continues to go down, frequency point of view. A little bit of uptick in medical cost. Not much indication that severity is moving adversely. And yet we're continuing to see this ever-increasing rise in the medical cost portion of expense. I believe the new filing says 69% medical, the balance being indemnity. would a fair assessment be, and I'm just asking, is this is not an indication that medical costs are necessarily going through the roof. Isn't it a combination of reducing length of indemnity and because certainly on a per unit basis, as payrolls have increased, our benefit level has increased. Can you help me make any logical sense from your perspective as to what is the major factor of medical costs being an ever-increasing percentage of the benefit paid? Help me get my arms around that.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing here is a situation where the indemnity benefits are falling at a greater pace than the loss ratio portion for medical. And you see the 3.5% trend for indemnity. You see the 0% trend factor for medical. So the indemnity is coming down faster than the medical, and for that reason, the medical is a larger portion, going to from 64%, I believe, is where we were last year, to 69% this year.
Well, the reason I brought it up is sure you were aware of it, and obviously now we are aware of it. And my job is not to defend any segment, but as these reports go out to, i.e., legislators, I think we have somewhat of an obligation to put in context that folks just cannot look at this and not dig into the detail and just assume, by God, them medical costs are going through the roof.
Right.
And that's the point I sort of wanted to bring up.
Good point. This slide right here looks at the filings dating back to 2005, including the minus 9.6% change that has been filed for 3/1/15. If you combine all of these changes back to 2004 reforms, it represents a 36% decrease over that 11-year period. And if you take a look on the right side of the last three, the 3/1/14, 7/1/14, and the 3/1/15 changes, that represents 21%. That minus 8.4, which was accepted by the commissioner at minus 6.95. The law only changed minus 5.9, and then if the 9.6 is approved, that will represent a 21% change over the last 12 months from 3/1/14 to 3/1/15, and a 36% change since the reforms in 2004.
Mr. Pitts?
While you're doing good, and I know you couldn't do this precisely, I don't remember what NCCI forecast as its impact of the reforms when that was costed prior to the approval of the reforms a year ago that went into effect July of this year.
What it was in 2004?
No. When NCCI was asked to cost the impact of the reform,
Right.
I think they went with a pretty conservative figure because a number of variables in that were not subject to being costed without experience. That really wasn't my big point. My question is, would you care to speculate on what this 9.6 figure might have been had this gone into effect January 1 of 14. You know, since we're only getting a 6-month potential impact in 14 of the results of reform, the figure got to be higher had it been for a 12-month duration. Yeah. So you've got me thinking about 2015.
Yeah, I would not even start to want to speculate on that, you know, in terms of the impact of
You would have to agree with me, though. It'd have to be more than this figure.
the 5.9 would, yeah, if it went on into 2015, sure.
Mr. Ramos had a comment, I believe.
Yes. Can you spell that out for me a little bit more, Mr. Shinnick? You just, I'm not sure exactly what this represents. It sounds good, but I need more explanation, I guess.
Okay, specifically.
Because here's what I'm seeing. I get that this is a 36% decrease since the reforms that we had in 2004. And then I'm also seeing that here we've got a trend that you say, even in medicals. I think Bob just mentioned that there's been a slight uptick in the Tennessee medical loss ratio, but you said there's a downward trend when we talk about the last 3 years, and it's a definite trend downward, correct?
The medical is appearing, but they look at, Greg, they look at more than just 2 or 3 years. They're going to go back on a 5-year basis to calculate the trend, I believe.
But when I was looking at that Tennessee medical loss ratio history, it looks like there's a downward trend actually since 2009 through 2013, right?
Right here?
Yes.
Yes, but I am not certain as to what period they use to determine trend.
Okay.
But, I mean, the naked eye appears from 2009 to 2012 as a downward trend.
And then the Tennessee indemnity loss ratio history looks to me, when I just look at the graph, that's the slide that you had just before this one. Oh, there it is. Looks like there's a downward trend ever since 2006, close to the 2004 reforms.
I would agree with you.
Okay. So with all that in mind, what is this 36% figure that you just mentioned, this 36% decrease? What is that in relation to the two graphs that I just mentioned? Can you just kind of fill me in and how is what all that says in that big picture?
Yeah, the graphs that we looked at showing indemnity and medical loss ratios are medical and indemnity losses compared to total premium. And those total premiums were impacted by the loss cost changes during that entire 11-year period. So they contemplate that. The 36% was basically just taking the 3.9 at the top and multiplying that all the way down to see what kind of impact they had on an overall basis since the 2004 reforms.
Thanks. That helps a lot. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Pitts?
Greg, I'm certainly not the expert that he is, but for someone been around this a long time, that might be helpful to you. You can look at these figures and think about it first in terms of you're trying to analyze either the national or the state block of business in workers' comp, period. All classes. But on the other hand, you cannot assume that this is whatever company in the state experienced in the workers' comp premium it paid for a couple of reasons. While this indicates the state of the industry, embedded in that are loss cost filings plus file multipliers that relate to a company's experience with its injuries or deaths in terms of both severity and duration. So you could have a company that was marginal or slightly bad in experience for one of those reasons, and they would not get close to the trend of the marketplace as a whole.
I guess I understand that. I'm just trying to get my arms around the 2014, I guess 2013 reforms that just took effect here in 2014. I see an industry that's actually doing pretty well, and then I'm trying to figure out in my mind what was the big need for the 2013 reforms that we just experienced here on July 1st, 2014. I guess that's still the big mystery in my mind.
There are probably numerous reasons, Greg, but I'll give it to you from one industry representative. Whatever you make of this data, what led to reform is a couple of things. One, we were non-competitive with most of our adjoining states, and that is of tremendous importance in terms of economic recruitment of business and industry to Tennessee, or the growth and expansion of business in Tennessee versus relocating or creating new operations in more favorable jurisdictions. The second piece of it, from business perspective, is the more that you can put certainty into the system, and we had a system with little certainty, the better that is for all of us. And those are the two major driving factors in reform, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd just like to underscore what you just said, and that in term, use the term predictability. You don't have much predictability at all in the old system, but you do have a lot more predictability through moving the adjudication out of the court system and moving over into an administrative system where judges are probably going to be a lot more aligned with each other. Okay?
Go ahead.
Thank you. You're welcome. We'll move on to look at the loss cost multipliers in Tennessee. So even though that the loss cost have been on the downturn for a number of years, the loss cost multipliers since 2011 have been increasing. And this is probably pretty typical with what's happening countrywide, and it's very indicative of the cycle that multipliers are increasing, and you know whether 144 is going to top it out this time around, or whether it's going to go up a tad bit more, we won't know until probably April of 2015. But it will be interesting to watch this to see if the market begins to start softening up a little bit. Would not surprise me, but we not know for sure. I will say that the multiplier is calculated using the weighted average market shares of the carriers for 2013. Since we didn't have 14 data, we used the closest year, 2013, and aligned that up with the loss cost multipliers filed with the department, with us.
Mr. Pitts.
Yes.
I guess, again, for the neophytes, which often includes me, this is the multiplier used, or at least it's an average of them, by any individual company, insurance company, against their loss cost filing. The point is, had these not been going up, the compliment I was sort of gigging our presenter about is simply this. Had they stayed constant, you would have seen the operating ratio still well back above 100. This is the correction process that gets them back closer to 100% or hopefully less than 100.
Good point. This is price changes that have occurred going back to really October, November of 2011. And it's got a lot of lines on here, and it's a little bit busy, I guess. But the blue line, the light blue line, is the actual average reported net rate change for that particular month. The red line is the quarterly average for the loss cost change. So what we see here is a comparison with what's going on with the loss cost with what's going on in overall cost. So if you look at September 2012 through May of 2013, the price increases were a lot more than just the loss cost changes. And if we look at since January of 14, they're tracking fairly closely with the loss cost changes. For the period in 2013, the rate change or the loss cost change, the price change was 0.6% up. Since 2014, since January 1 of 2014, the change is minus 3.6%. So, again, prices are moderating. This just gives some touch points here for the loss cost multipliers. 80% of all the loss cost multipliers that are in Tennessee are between a 107 and a 170 or below 170. So that's where the bulk of the market is. 27% of the market is above a 156, which is the loss cost multiplier for the assigned risk plan. The median was 144. It happens to be the mean as well. And I will point out that if you're interested in looking at the individual companies and what those loss cost multipliers are, they are on our website. So, and we update those monthly. This is the work comp premium tax revenues back to 8/31/10. I don't have. We're not through the year end in 14, so I couldn't use those. It's interesting to note that the self-insurance revenue is going down and the insurance revenue is going up. Going up, not surprising about the insurance revenue because the premiums have been increasing, as we saw on a previous graph. And certainly this year we've had some reduction in, or 2013, we've had a reduction in self-insurance premium both on a group basis and an individual self-insurance basis. And then, as I mentioned, the change in the multiplier in terms of developing equivalent premium, which is what premium taxes are charged on for individual self-insured risk. All right, we'll shift to the assigned risk plan, and I hope I don't step on Tom's toes here, covering some of this material. But this just kind of shows you a historical view of the premiums in the assigned risk plan since 1998. This is the year that Aon took over the administration of the assigned risk plan. And you see, again, the very cyclical nature of the plan. When premiums, I just remind you every year, but when the premiums are at their lowest, when they're at the low ebb, we expect the worst experience because the better business is picked up by the market in a growth mode when the voluntary market is aggressive, and they leave the poorest quality business. And so that's what we've actually seen in the results. The opposite of that is true as far as the best experience is concerned. We have the largest premium volume years producing the best experience because there's good business, obviously, that the market has turned aside on. Loss cost multiplier history of the assigned risk plan. We've seen some fairly low loss cost multipliers since 2009. We have worked real hard to remove the surplus levels that we generated back in 2001 through 2007 or 8, when the multipliers were high. And I've got a projection of what we're going to anticipate a recommendation being for 3/1/15. This is the market share for the assigned risk plan. The dotted red line represents, the dotted red line represents the threshold for the commissioner report to the advisory council, to you. If it gets to 15%, TCA 56-5-314 requires the commissioner to provide that percentage, which we've tracked each year. The reasons for the percentage being at 15 points or higher, and the recommendations to address the large market share if it gets to 15%. We've only been, since 2002, we've only been there once. Very, very close in 2004. I believe that was in 2003 when we actually had to report to the advisory council, and we put some changes in place. One of those changes was to non-renew the business that was in the assigned risk plan every 3 years and require the agent to go back out into the marketplace to seek coverage. If they couldn't find coverage, and they have access back into the assigned risk plan. 7.14% is the 2013 market share to the total volume of work comp premium written in Tennessee. The countrywide number from NCCI, that number is 8. So we fare a little bit better than countrywide, which is nice to see. It's not always been that way. This is a comparison with the voluntary loss cost multipliers on a weighted average basis and the assigned risk multiplier. You can see in this year, the assigned risk multiplier stands at 1.56 compared to 1.44. 8%, pretty close. And I've certainly heard some folks say, man, that's too close. We certainly don't want to be competing with the voluntary market. There's a fine balance here, and that is to not produce any surplus. It's to get premiums where they should be to provide more of a break-even or slight loss in the assigned risk plan. That's what NCCI does, is they produce, on average, for all their states, a slight loss. So that rate adequacy is a very, very high priority with us and with NCCI as well. And the other balance is to monitor the loss cost multipliers in the voluntary market and make sure that we're not too close to where the market is. I think the slide that I showed you previously showed about 26% of the multipliers being above a 1.56. So we've got quite a bit of business written above the assigned assigned risk levels. And you might say, how can that be? Why would somebody want their premiums to be higher than the assigned risk plan? Well, the average scheduled credit has been running about 7% in the voluntary market, and you don't have scheduled credit in the assigned risk plan. Matter of fact, you have a tabular surcharge, which is like a scheduled debit. It runs down to 150. It runs up to 15% debit. So you have that. That provides some cushion for folks that are writing, let's say at a 170. They can put the scheduled credit up and on it and get it at or below the assigned risk multiplier. Okay, this is assigned risk bookings. You kind of see what's happening this year. For the first 6 months of 2014, compared to the same period in 2013, bookings were up 13%. I just updated this number. We had an adjustment made in some of the booking from those June numbers, so it's a little higher than it has been. That compares to about 6% for NCCI states, 6% growth as compared to Tennessee being 13% growth. Just the opposite of that is true for 13, where in 13 bookings were up for us 18%. For NCCI, they were up 22%. So not a big difference, but certainly more of a difference this year than last year. I think we've already covered that slide. Now, what we're going to look at in the next couple of slides is what we're going to project, what we're going to recommend for the loss cost multiplier in the assigned risk plan going forward. This light blue line is break even, 71% break even. And you see on the slide it says 160 leveled LCM, loss cost multiplier. That simply is the number that Aon actuaries are telling us that over a 9-year period, that is what it should be if we have another year just like that 9-year period, then we needed about a 160. We're probably going to recommend a 157 because we're in a period of time where premiums are growing. We're up towards that top end of the cycle where we showed you earlier where the best experience was, and we anticipate that being the case now. So we're projecting probably a 157, so just 1 point higher than where we are currently. If you look on the right side, the little shaded red box is where the premiums were at the lowest in 2009 and 2010, and the results were worse. Now, I step back and I need to explain the 160 leveled. 160, basically, it takes the actual loss cost multiplier that were in effect in all those years and changes them to 1.60 so that we can see consistently what the experience is, how the experience is tracking if the loss cost multipliers were the same and we're at that 160 level. So you can see in the 2009-2010 that experience was the worst. I mean, well over 100%, even at 160. And we've got some pretty good experience coming in at 2012. This just gives you some documentation on what we're doing. Commissioner, I will write, and the commissioner will opine and sign a letter to you guys indicating what we want to do as far as the loss cost multiplier is concerned. But I'm going to skip this because I've already pretty much touched on it. The only thing that we would want to point out is that we're not doing any adverse selection here. adverse deviation from adverse selection because we're in a good year premium wise, not in a poor year of the low part of the cycle. If we were to take the real bad year, 2010, which had a $5 million claim, and include that in the data, which we did not include, which the actuaries did not include to produce a 160, it would be a 166. It would go up that much. So we think probably a 157 is going to be adequate for our needs going forward.
Mr.
Yes,
Pitts has
Mr. Pitts.
Mike, when you go back and look at your data that shows, what is it, a 0.27 overlap between the assigned risk pool and the voluntary market, has anybody ever approached it from the standpoint of how much overlap there should be?
If you look at the top part of the graph, it says that the average has been 19%. That average is probably too high because considering that we were at a 195 in 04 and 05. No, I don't know of anybody that's approached me saying this is the number that it should be. It should be at least 10 points or it should be 15 points. Nobody's approached me with that. And I don't know of any other states that do that.
I thought I saw in here somewhere that it had crept up within 0.8 of each
8%,
other.
that's correct. That's this year.
Does that not bother the regulators of that tightening? Surely a 1.57 won't open that gap very much.
No, it won't. You're welcome to comment on your letter to the commissioner when.
Well, as I prepare to comment, I'm sort of intrigued to the rationale as to why we're looking at that number rather than something else. I'm looking for a little insight.
While we're looking at the 157 as opposed to
160, 161.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, what is it about making a more meaningful move that would be disconcerting to the regulator? How do you get there? I'm not picking at you. I'm just trying to understand.
Well, my focus has been on removing surplus. I think in terms of the way that I have observed the cycle running is that in this particular graph right here, we show the need for the LCM for these good years, premium-wise, between 2004 and 2007 to be a 157. That's what the data's telling us. And so I just take that good period and bring it forward and say that's representative of where we are right now in this premium cycle, and it's appropriate for us to use a 157.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move from assigned risks to self-insured groups. We have 5. We had 5 at the beginning of the year. We have 4 now because the Tennessee Healthcare Association discontinued writing business on April 1st of this year. So we've dropped probably 3 or 4 since I've been here, you know, I think that one was not particularly large, and I think that may have been a factor in them deciding to do something different. Insolvencies. Thankfully, there has not been any addition to this list from last year. I have listed only those companies that had $1 million of unpaid losses or higher. So we have about 4,400 claims total that the Guaranty Fund has handled. About $95 million since 2001 of paid claims. about $76 million in unpaid claims remain. So we'll watch this, but no additions. This is a graph just kind of showing the numbers per year. I have to reiterate, and you might want to write this down on your presentation sheet there, is that this also involves companies with $1 million in unpaid claims or higher. I failed to put that on the title. Guarantee fund assessments. We have not had any assessments since 2005. And this is a graph that we introduced last year. There's virtually been no change on this. The ratings have not changed. We updated this 8/1. And what this shows is the AM Best ratings of companies and their premium volume in Tennessee. So 57% of the market has ratings of A+, or A or A minus. And the dark blue is superior at A+ or A++. And then we have 3 carve-out amounts, 2% being for non-rated companies, 1% good, and 1% weak. That's for volume, companies that have volume in Tennessee of $1 million or more. The Tennessee Restaurant Association, we have closed that completely. We got a court order that closed that receivership, so this will be the last year we show it. And this is the final slide that I have to show. And this comes from the AIS, the annual issue symposium that I attend in May. And Steve Klingel provides one word that describes the market, the environment, countrywide, and he used the term balance. And you can see why. We've got the same number of positives and negatives. There's certainly improvement in the underwriting results, which were obvious today. Strong investment income of 15%. Capital position is very positive. Employment growth continues. I mentioned that, and that's probably what's driving a lot of the premium growth. Frequency and severity are not a problem. They're well behaved. The negatives are low interest rate environment continues. Embedded bond yields continue to decline because the current bond yields are much less than the mature bond yields. Uncertainty surrounded TRIA. We're still waiting on Congress to address the TRIA. We'll see whether that will be extended here for another 5 to 7 years. Construction and manufacturing employment are somewhat lagging, and uncertainty of the impact of the ACA on workers' compensation. We won't know that for a few years. That wraps it up. I'll be glad to answer any closing questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shinnick. Before we get to it, Mr. Pitts, do we have any questions or comments from the members participating by telephone? I want to give you all a chance to speak if you have something. Hearing none, I think Mr. Pitts would like to be recognized.
Mike, before you leave me, I got one other question, not in your report, but in sort of looking at the upcoming filing. Do you agree with me that there's been a fairly significant shift in the companies that are writing the major block of business in this state over the last 2 or 3 years? Has there not been some movement?
Yes, there has been. Liberty Mutual was the number one writer for a number of years, as far back as I can remember, and I believe Travelers now is the largest player, and I think Liberty may be one, it may be 2 or 3, and certainly some shift in companies like Accident Fund out of Michigan. They've come in here over the last 8 or 10 years and really written a lot of premium. So I think they're top 5.
I just sort of looked to me like there's a couple of companies that have come out of nowhere to be fairly significant players. And then I thought it was interesting to note that nobody's got in excess of 10% of the market.
That's right.
Are there any further questions or comments from the council members? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Shinnick. We will acknowledge receipt of this report into the record of the meeting today. The next presentation on the agenda is by Tom Riedel, Senior Vice President of Aon Risk Services Central, Inc. He is presenting the annual Assigned Risk Data Plan report, and as soon as he gets his PowerPoint up, we'll start. Thank you, Mr. Riedel.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Members of the Advisory Council, my name is Tom Riedel with Aon. We are the plan administrator of the Tennessee Workers' Compensation Insurance Plan. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and stand before you and cover some of the data that we have. And essentially, the format that I've used is one that I've used in years past, so it's going to look a little bit familiar to you, but the data is different. I have 2 handouts for you. The larger bound copy, essentially all of the slides, and there's a handout that has all the slides we're going to cover today, are included in here, but also in here is some additional data and sort of a narrative analysis that I did not do as a slide. So really, I'll be working from this. And last slide says questions, but if you guys have any questions while I'm presenting today, feel free to interrupt me and ask, and I'll try to address those as best I can. The first slide that I have today really is just, I put this in here really for general informational purposes to give you all a sense of the structure of the Tennessee Workers' Compensation Insurance Plan and who really the players are within the plan. The larger box in the middle shows Aon Group, and that's us, that's Aon. We are the plan administrator, and within that box, it really covers a lot of the things that we do as the plan administrator. We work very closely and essentially report to the Department of Commerce and Insurance. I work very closely with Mike regarding all the facets of the various issues that come up in our role as the plan administrator. The Department of Finance Administration is shown there as the entity or the governmental body that handles the procurement process, the public bidding process that we go through to become a plan administrator for Tennessee. In the red box below us shows servicing carriers and direct assignment carriers. And I think you all are fairly familiar with what the difference between the two are, but essentially servicing carriers are carriers that have gone through a bid process that we have conducted as the plan administrator to act as the service providers for the employers that have to get their insurance through the TWCIP. We have conducted a bid process. They give us a price. And they issue policies under their own insurance company's names, but essentially they are not on the risk for the financial losses that occur. They are reinsured 100% by the TWCIP. The insurance companies that write workers' comp in the state of Tennessee have to financially support the financial results of the TWCIP. If there's a surplus, they're going to get a part of that. If there's a deficit, they're going to get a part of that, based on their voluntary market share. However, in Tennessee, it's not the case in every state, but there are a handful of states where there is a provision that allows workers' compensation insurers in the voluntary market, instead of supporting the financial results of the TWCIP, they're allowed to take their share of accounts that come to the TWCIP on a direct basis. They're called direct assignment carriers. Travelers probably being the largest direct assignment carrier, they have roughly 8% voluntary market share, so they're getting roughly 8% of the premium that comes to the TWCIP of the policyholders there. They issue their own policy, but they have to live with their own financial results. So they use the TWCIP rates. They have to live up to the TWCIP servicing standards, and they're subject to annual audits and things such as that. So there are other direct assignment carriers as well: Cincinnati, Hartford, Zurich, CNA, and this year we have Liberty Mutual has joined that as well. So we, in our role as plan administrator, are overseeing the servicing carriers and the direct assignment carriers, and inside the box it shows you the things that they do. We have some in-state partners that help us with our program here. Nashville Bank and Trust is now called Truxton Trust. Sigma Actuarial is a actuarial consulting firm in Brentwood that helped us develop a loss-sensitive rating plan. Waller, Lanston, Dorch, and Davis is a local law firm that we work with regarding legal-related issues. And Lattimore, Black, Morgan, and Kane is a local accounting firm that essentially does the bookkeeping and helps with an annual audit. In the next slide, I have just showing some information regarding the number of incoming phone calls that we receive annually. In our role, we have a couple of folks that really deal with the agent community on a daily basis, processing the applications and answering questions that they might have. You can see in 2013, we had a slight reduction in the number of phone calls, roughly a 5.5% reduction. Or 5.5% when I look at, it's 2.2% reduction between 2013 and 2012. When I look at really the first 6 months of 2014, which is not up on the slide, and compare that to the first 6 months of 2013, we're seeing roughly a 5.5% reduction. So, you know, it's not a big piece of information, but it's a piece of information that you can plug into some of the other data we have that, you know, is leading us to believe that the premium volume and the amount of business in the TWCIP is leveling off at this particular point in time. Next slide shows the number of applications processed on an annual basis. We did see an increase of roughly 9.2% from 2012 to 2013. It's not on the slide again, but I looked at the first 6 months of 2014, compared that to the first 6 months of 2013. And just like with the phone calls, the same percentage, a minus 5.5% decrease in the number of applications. So I think it's just a matter of coincidence that the numbers were the same, but I think sort of gives us an idea that things may be slowing down a bit. Our next slide is really just a flow chart to give you a sense of how the premium flows in the TWCIP. And this really is only looking at the servicing carrier side of the thing, of the plan. As I mentioned before, direct assignment carriers are assigned the account. They use the TWCIP rates, but they keep the premium and they keep all the losses. Where the difference is with servicing carriers is they don't actually retain the losses. It all gets transferred to the plan. The premiums and losses get transferred to the plan, and the financial outcome is to the benefit, or if there are assessments, the industry that writes work comp in Tennessee pays for that. Does anybody have any questions at this point? In this next slide, I'm showing here, we have a couple of different forms of data that we have for the TWCIP. We have a application database that we use to essentially make the random assignments of applicants that come into the plan to the various servicing carriers and direct assignment carriers. The information that we receive, the policy, the premium information that we receive, essentially is an estimate of what the premium is going to be, either at the time of the application or when the renewal quote was sent out to the policyholder. This data is not updated if there's a cancellation. It's not updated if there is a payroll audit at the end of the policy term that generates additional premium, or a refund of premium. But it is it's useful data to help us make the random assignments, and it's useful data, I think, to help us spot trends in the marketplace fairly quickly. In the light blue highlighted column, showing a written premium broken down between the servicing carriers and the direct assignment carriers. The 2 servicing carriers are at the top, and then the other 6 carriers are direct assignment carriers, and then showing the grand total premium at the bottom of that column. The yellow column shows the same information, but for 2013. And then off to the side, the 2 columns off to the side, premium variance and policy variance, really are showing essentially the difference in premium or the number of policies for each of those carriers, comparing 2013 to 2012. As you can see, we had roughly a 15.5% increase in premium, with about 14.2% increase in the number of policies. I didn't put it on the slide, but and I think Mike may have covered this in his presentation a little bit. When I look at the new and renewal premium January through June 2014 and compare that to the same new and renewal premium for the same period in 2013, roughly a 13% increase, 12.7% is what I have. Looking at the year before, really comparing 13 to 12, the same 6-month period, we had about a 22% increase. So it looks like, premium may be increasing, but at a much lower rate or a lesser rate than what it has in the past. One thing that I thought was interesting is when I look at the same time period, but only look at new business, new applicants coming to the plan, and compare that to new applicants coming to the plan the first 6 months of 2012, or 2013 rather, there's really no change in the amount of new business. It's not increasing, it's not decreasing, it essentially was flat. So again, I think that's another piece of information that leads us to believe that things are flattening out for the assigned risk plan. Next slide is essentially it's the same premium and policy count information. The blue columns are 2012 information, and the yellow columns are 2013 information. Excuse me, the policy and premium totals are the same as the prior slide, but essentially this gives us a premium size comparison. So we have a sense of the size of accounts, the number of accounts, how much premium they represent in these various categories that you see up on the slide. The information that I sort of glean out of this is when I look at, and this is in the narrative part of the report that I've given to you today, essentially for premium accounts over $100,000 in premium, we've seen a 3% decrease in premium, but a 9.8% increase in the number of policies. If you look at the $100,000 to $249,000 range on the slide, you can see we went from 52 policies in 2012 to 59 policies in 2013. Exactly why there's more growth there versus anything over 250,000 or 500,000, it's a little hard to say. We do have a loss-sensitive rating plan that's been approved for the TWCIP for accounts that are paying over 250,000 in premium. That requires them to assume, in a sense, part of the risk for their own results. And the program in the TWCIP is honestly not very competitive to what's available in the marketplace, in the voluntary marketplace. So I think some of the larger accounts that need to be on a retro plan, a retrospective rating plan, are doing that in the voluntary market. It is interesting to note that when you look at the premium between $1,000 and $10,000 in premium, we did see an 18.9% increase in premium and a 13.3% increase in the number of policies. Exactly why that is, it's hard to say. Maybe the economy is improving and there are newer, smaller businesses that are getting coverage, work comp coverage. And a lot of times, new businesses, smaller new businesses, really have to turn to the TWCIP for coverage because a lot of times voluntary market carriers really are not interested in insuring newer businesses that don't have sort of a financial track record. There's concerns about getting premiums paid and things like that, so that the voluntary market has a tendency to shy away from those folks. The average premium numbers compared to 2013 to 2012 essentially are very close to each other. Roughly $5,288 for 2013 and $5,231 for 2012. So small increase there. Any questions? The next slide and the next series of slides really is giving us an idea of sliced really two different ways, by policy count and by premium. A sense of who are the top 20 employment classifications, employer classifications in the TWCIP. In this slide right here, we're looking at 2012, and in the highlighted column on the left shows the rank from 1 to 20, and of course the information in between tells you what those classifications are and how much premium they represented in the assigned risk plan. This data does come from our assignment database, so it doesn't contemplate canceled policies or audits and things like that. But it's good to give you an idea of, okay, what types of employers are the predominant employers in the assigned risk pool. Next slide is again slicing this information by policy count, but essentially it's showing you, okay, here's the 2013 rank for the top 20 classes. That's what's in the yellow highlighted column to the left. The next column to it shows what they ranked, what that particular class code ranked in 2012. You get an idea of how things might be changing from 12 to 13. And in this case, things really didn't change very much. Next slide is slicing the data by premium and looking at the top 20 premium classes in the assigned risk pool for 2012. We'll move on to the next slide as it gives you a little bit of, it's looking at this information by premium, but the second column from the left shows you where those classes ranked in 2012. Pretty big jump for machine shops. The construction executive, our contractor's executive supervisor code has seen an increase, along with masonry and adult daycare centers. The next slide is, it's really the last four slides we've looked at, but calling out anything that is not construction. And this is just looking at construction class codes, sorting it by policy count, and looking at 2012. Next slide is, again, construction only, sorted by policy count, showing you the top 20 for 2013, and then in the column, the blue highlighted column, showing you where those classes ranked in 2012. Not a lot of changes there, really pretty consistent year to year. This is essentially the same information but sorted by premium, giving you the top premium classes for 2012, top 20 premium construction premium classes for 2012. The next slide is a little better comparison, showing you the top 20 for 2013, and again, in the second from the left column, showing you where that class ranked in 2012 and where there might be some movement. A little bit of movement here, but not a ton. Fairly consistent from 2012 to 2013. The next slide is really moving on to a different subject here. And this is data that does not come from our assignment database. This is data that's reported every quarter, updated every quarter, reported to us by the servicing carriers and direct assignment carriers. This data does contemplate any adjustments in premium due to audit or cancellation or things such as that. So this is much more accurate and reliable premium information, and really shows in sort of the long term how the assigned risk pool has grown and shrunk, and the last few years started to grow again in premium. Next slide is really giving you a sense of financial results for each of the particular plan years, policy years. And essentially a plan year or policy year is the same thing. It's policies with an effective date during the calendar year. So whether the policy has an effective date of January 1st or December 31st, 2014, that's plan year or policy year 2014. Each of these years stands on its own financially. So if there's a surplus in a particular year, that surplus will be distributed. It won't go to cover a deficit in some other year. So every year sort of stands on its own, as the voluntary market is a little bit different from year to year. The next slide really is a depiction of showing you, again, the total numbers are the same as the prior slide, but the green portion of the bar shows you how much has been assessed, either if it was a deficit, or how much surplus has been distributed if it's a surplus. We don't assess for the years until essentially a deficit has been reached on a paid loss basis, meaning essentially that particular year has run out of money and we have to do an assessment. That essentially is all that I have today. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Are there any questions from the members here today? Seeing none, do we have any questions from the members participating by telephone, or any comments? Hearing none, I think Mr. Pitts may have a comment.
This question may not be for you as much as it might be for Mike. While it appears you're in good financial shape, relatively speaking, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but it would appear to me, since our low point of premium written in the assigned risk plan was probably 2010, just guessing at the graphs, our premium is now up from that low point, probably in the range of $25 to $30 million.
Right.
Does that cause anyone concern? And while you're thinking about that, I remember when strong efforts were being made to bring down the volume in the assigned risk pool, a number of things were done. Are those incentives still in place? Have we dropped anything we were doing to encourage that number to be lowered? And if we haven't, does the department have any thoughts of what might be done to pull down this amount of business in the pool even further?
Mike, I don't know, do you want to answer that question? I don't know that we have really sat down and talked about a new strategy. I think the one thing that was implemented, and I can't forget the year it came in, but was the 3-year non-renewal, the 3-year non-renewal requirement for nobody can be insured in the TWCIP for more than 3 consecutive years. They get a non-renewal notice. They have to go back out and try to obtain coverage in the voluntary market. They can reapply to the TWCIP, but they have to demonstrate that they they did try to get coverage in the voluntary market. We do have what we call depopulation, planned depopulation initiative. We have one carrier that essentially, and it's open to any carrier to give us, meet certain standards and give us essentially some general underwriting guidelines for accounts that they're willing to insure for less than what the assigned risk pool charges. We have one carrier that is currently doing that, and through the software built into our application system, it will filter out if an account gets flagged that would, at least in a general sense, qualify for this carrier. Information is automatically sent to the carrier, the application information, and there's an opportunity, essentially a 3-day period for the carrier to sort of complete their underwriting and to determine whether they want to offer voluntary market coverage to that particular policyholder or not. I wouldn't say that that program has been a great success. We could take a closer look at that, and there may be some ways to tweak that to get greater participation into that program, the Planned Depopulation Initiative, which may help to depopulate the pool. I think we started that probably when we were in the trough of premium volume, with the idea that when the pool got bigger, it may be more attractive to carriers to join that program. So I think that's probably an area that we could look at and either make improvements to or do a better job of soliciting carriers for that program to help depopulate the pool. Anything else you want to add, Mike?
Yeah, Mr. Shinnick?
The equivalent of the LSRP, we call it our tail plan, and it's our large risk plan designed for risk of $250,000 in standard premium. Standard premium is the premium prior to premium discount. So, and if you look at the slides here, that puts them on a retro, and the retro has a max of a 165. Tom alluded to the fact that it's not very attractive at all, and we designed it that way so that they can find a better mousetrap in the voluntary market. I'm looking for the slide here, but it showed. I'm sorry, back here. It showed the premium segments here. If you look at the premium segment from 250 to above 500, premium variance there is 11.2% down for 250 to 500 and 62% down for 500 and above. So that is a depopulation initiative right there of putting that program into play, and it seems to have worked well. And there are companies in there that have actually made money on it because there's a 25% downswing, 25% credit, so they can really reduce their premium, and they've done that. So I think it gives them motivation to go back into the voluntary market and to find a large deductible policy, for example. And so I think that's helped, and it will continue to help.
Are there any further questions from the council members? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Riedel.
you.
We will acknowledge receipt of this report into the record of today's meeting. Is there any further business to come before the council today? Have a motion to adjourn by Mr. Pitts. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Selvey, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.